for you guys to do and turn in through your MyTC course page. Do not worry about the deadlines on those. I'm extending all the deadlines probably through like the 15th of April. So if you're turning these in late, don't worry about it. I'm going to eliminate all penalties for late work and extend it out through the 15th. So take a look at your MyTC course page. Make sure you do the lab activity exercises, because it's actually going to help you with the content. And what's colored are the bones we're actually going to go over today. So these are the bones we're going to be talking about today. We're going to save this little bad boy for Thursday. So the first bone we're going to take a look at, you would get on your test, how that would look is you would get like this picture, and I would say name the bone in red. So you just have to give me the name of the bone, and you type it into the block, and there you go. So femur, I'm not going to worry about right and left. Femur is all I'm interested in. So that's plenty enough for you to be able to get full credit. This bone, I wouldn't show you in this format. This is the femur, but I would not give you that particular picture because of the way it's arranged and organized on the slide. I don't really like that. This, however, would be a valid picture. If I was to give you one of these bones, you should be able to identify it as the femur bone. And some giveaways, because one of the things people do is they get the femur bone mixed up with the humerus, okay, because they do have similar structures to them. But if you take a look at this, this right here is the neck of the femur. We also had a neck. We had a surgical neck on the humerus. But the humerus, it was not as dramatic. So here's the head of the femur, and that neck is really narrow compared to what it looked like on the humerus bone. So that's one way to really help identify the femur versus the humerus. So what is the structure here called that the arrow is pointing to? It's called the head. Now on your test, all I'm going to have you put down is head. I think I told you guys when we did this previously before spring break, I said you had to say something like head of humerus in order to get credit for that. We are not doing that on this particular test anymore because of the format of the test. So I don't want you to miss it because the number of spaces between the letters are off, and then it would count it wrong. So because it's a computer graded test, you will know immediately what you made. But it also causes a source of error when you have long phrases that need to be graded. So to eliminate that source of error for just from a grading perspective, head is all you'd have to put. And I'd prompt you to have something like one word answer. So that way you don't accidentally put too many words when you're typing in the answer or the response. Now this narrowing just below the head, again, is going to be the neck. And you can just answer with neck. You don't have to include the word of femur. Other features on the femur bone that you need to know is this bump back here on the opposite side of the bone is where the head is. That's called the greater trochanter. So yes, you would need to include all of that. Greater trochanter for that one. And I am going to go back through when you guys finish grading that, when you guys finish taking the test, I'm going to go back through and just kind of scroll through the general answers and make sure you're not getting it counted wrong for something silly. Like, I don't know, maybe you maybe you made an I out of an E or something like that. If it's something like that, I'll give you credit for it probably. So spelling does count on this test more so than normal. So be careful on the spelling. So we're still looking at the femur bone. So I want to ask you guys a question. We talked about the humerus last time, and we said something about the head of the humerus. Do you guys remember there's the head of the femur? Do you guys remember the head is always on what side of the bone?
Medial.
Medial. So this is the medial side of the bone. This is the lateral side of the bone. So that head is a huge indication to help you naming this bony protrusion that's on the medial side of the bone. It's called the medial condyle. So if you know that this is on the medial side, then it makes that bump, which is what a condyle is, a bumpy protrusion, it makes it easier to name that. Now, this right here, there's your head. So this is the medial side of the bone, which would mean this is the lateral side of the bone. So here is a bumpy protrusion on the lateral side of the bone. So it's going to be the lateral condyle. And this right here is an indention, which we call a fossa, F-O-S-S-A. That's an indention, and it's between the two condyles. So there is a depression or an indention that exists between two condyles. So if you know that's what that means, put it in fancy terms, intercondylar fossa, which literally translates to depression or indention between the two bumpy protrusions. Does anybody have any questions about the femur before we go on to the tibia?
Nope.
Okay, so just like what we just said, this is, guess what, the tibia. So if you were asked, you would say, okay, that red bone is the tibia bone. Now, if you notice, I want you to look at, there's two bones in the lower leg. So you have the tibia bone, which is highlighted in red, and then you have this other bone right here, which is smaller, okay? So the tibia bone would be the medial bone of the lower leg. This bone over here is the lateral bone of the lower leg. Okay, so notice the position of where that tibia bone is. It's the medial bone of the lower leg. Now, it really kind of doesn't look like any of the other bones we've looked at before. It doesn't really look like anything. This is the first bone we've had that has this structure to it. So you should be able to identify it fairly easily and differentiate it from other bones because it just doesn't look like any of the other bones. So what are some structures? Again, you're looking at the anterior surface of the bone. So you're looking at the bone like it's straight on. And this right here is a bumpy protrusion. So we're going to call that the medial condyle. That bumpy protrusion is a condyle. Now, how do you know medial versus lateral? Take a look down here. Y'all see that bony protrusion down there? This means you are on the medial side of that bone. So that means this side of the bone is the lateral side. So that little bump down here, that is the medial side of the bone. That's how you know it's the medial condyle. Which means this bump on this side of the bone must be the lateral side, because there's your bump down there, which tells you, hey, this is the medial side of the bone. So that would be the lateral condyle, the bumpy protrusion on the lateral side. Now up here, this is where your knee is. Okay, this down here is the ankle. Now this is a sharp ridge that runs down the front of that bone. You can feel that sharp ridge if you were just to feel your tibia right now. It's where you would, if you've ever had shin splints, this is kind of the area that hurts. It's not the ridge that hurts, it's all the tendons and stuff attached to it. But this is called the anterior crest. It's a raised portion on the front of this tibia bone. And you can feel your own anterior crest. You can feel that bumpy protrusion on that bone, that bumpy ridge. This right here, you can barely see it in the picture, but it's this structure right here. You can feel it with your own, you can feel your own bony protrusion there on the tibia. If you were to kneel down, this is the part of the tibia that's in contact with the floor. So when you kneel down, this is what's in contact with the floor. It's called the tibial tuberosity. So I know everybody's getting up and kneeling on the floor right now, so you can find that tibial tuberosity. So this structure right here, we already said it was on the medial side of the bone, but let's give that bumpy protrusion there a name, and it's called the medial. It's on the medial side of the bone, malleolus. Now, where's that at? That's the inside of your ankle. So you can feel that bony protrusion. That's your inside ankle area is where that is. It's not your ankle bones. Your ankle bones are going to be down in through here, okay? But this bony protrusion is that inside of that ankle joint that you're feeling. Okay, so this bone here, if I was just to ask you to name the bone, if you notice, it is on the lateral side of the lower leg. Sorry, my spelling was bad on that one. This is the fibula. Now, I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy, but some of you guys who have been home with the little ones might know what I'm talking about. So there's this cartoon from 100 years ago, VeggieTales. I don't know if y'all have heard of it or not. But anyway, this is how I remembered when I first started learning these bones, because I'm not too far out from learning these bones just like you guys did. I bet I probably learned them 5 years ago, so it hasn't been that long. I never took the anatomy portion of anatomy, so I've had to learn this stuff just like you guys have had to learn it. And one way I remembered it was you've got the tibia, which is, whoops, T-I-B-I-A. Make sure you spell that correctly. And this is the fibula. What I get a lot of times on the test are a blend of these two words to make up new words to name these bones, because people forget the tibia versus the fibula. I get interesting answers on this. So how I remembered it when I was trying to learn this is the fibula is the little bone. Notice the tibia is quite a bit bigger, a little bit thicker. That fibula is a very small bone. So in VeggieTales, if you guys remember the episode with Junior Asparagus, and he told a lie. Well, it was a little lie, so they called it a fib. So that's how I remember the little bone is the fibula, and the big bone is the tibia. Anyway, whatever works, right? So again, this is the fibula that the arrow is pointing to, this bone right here, and it's next to the tibia, but this is not the bone I'm asking you about. I'm asking you about the fibula, specifically this area of the fibula down here. Now, this is the ankle down here. So that is the lateral malleolus. Remember, this structure right here on the tibia bone was the medial malleolus. So if you feel on either side of your ankle joint, you can feel those two bony protrusions. One of them is the bottom part of the tibia bone. The other one's the bottom part of the fibula bone. Okay, before we go into the dizzy bone, does anybody have any questions about any of the bones so far? Okay. So, sorry if I'm making you dizzy on this. These are the tarsal bones. So all the bones that are colored are considered your tarsal bones. Those are your ankle bones. So if you look, you can take a look at where that tibia bone fits and where that fibula bone fits in relation to that ankle joint. And specifically, if I was to say, name these bones, name the bones that are colored, you would say, okay, well, they're just the tarsal bones. We are going to specifically take a look at two of these bones, though. Let's get rid of the dizzy page. We're going to specifically take a look at two of them specifically, that purple bone there and the yellow bone there. So we're going to name those specific bones of the tarsals. Now, the purple bone is the calcaneus bone, the calcaneus bone. So take a look at how that calcaneus bone is looking. If I was to draw the floor down here, okay, well, whoops, okay, so the foot is now going through the floor. Let's try that again. Something like that. This would be the floor. What tarsal bone is in contact with the floor? Well, that would be the calcaneus bone. This is your heel. That's what's hitting the floor. And then this is your arch of your foot. And that's not supposed to be hitting the floor. Some people have flat arches, but it's not supposed to be hitting the floor. So that heel that's touching the floor, that's your calcaneus bone. This yellow bone up here, this is the top bone of those tarsals. It's the top uppermost bone. So a way you can remember that is T for top, T for talus. So that yellow bone is the talus bone. It's also the one, T top, T talus, T tibia. It's also the one that's connecting with the tibia bone. Okay. So next we have just the red bone by itself. So hopefully you can see that this is the one that's articulating or in contact with the floor. So this would be the calcaneus bone. And then this bone right here, which is the top tarsal bone, because it's the top tarsal bone and it's articulating with this tibia back here. Yes, it's articulating with the fibula, but it kind of messes up my T thing going on. This is the talus bone. Okay, now these that are represented in green, these are going to be your metatarsals. Now, just like we learned when we talked about our metacarpals, our metatarsals, we have 5 of them, and they need to be numbered. Otherwise, we're not going to know which one we're talking about. So your toe, your big toe, is going to be metatarsal number 1. Your toe next to that is going to be metatarsal number 2. The middle one is metatarsal number 3. Metatarsal number 4, and the little pinky toe is metatarsal number 5. So on your test, it would probably be a 2-part answer on this, where I would say name maybe this bone right here, and it would be blank and blank. So you would have 2 parts to this answer choice. So you would put metatarsal in the first block. Whoops. And then 2 in the second block, because I can't have you guys write metatarsal number 2 because there's so many ways to do that that the computer won't know what's what. So that's probably how I'm going to ask that question on the test. So you do need to know the numbers. You need to be able to correctly number your metatarsal bones. And again, here they are numbered. So this would be the big toe, and this would be the little toe. So hopefully you can see the difference between the big toe and the little toe. And structurally, the big toe and the little toe are different. The big toe is like your thumb. If you remember how many bones your thumb has, your thumb digit only has 2 bones. So your big toe only has 2 bones. There's one, there's one. Those are the digits or the phalanges of your big toe. There's only 2 of them. There's only 2 bones there. Now, if you look at all the other bones, they have 3 bones that make up the phalanges or the digits. They all have a yellow one, a purple one, and a blue one. These are all the digits. Now, the yellow ones are your proximal digits or proximal phalanges. The purple ones are your middle digits or middle phalanges. And the blue ones are your distal digits or your distal phalanges. These are where your toenails are located, right? On your distal digits. So your toe bone, your big toe, does not have a blue bone. So there's no middle digit number 1. Does not exist. Middle digit number 1 does not exist. So you have a proximal digit number 1 and you have a distal digit number 1. No middle digit number 1. So if I was to ask you to name, whoops. This bone right here, I'll give you a second and you tell me what you think the name of that purple bone on that second toe would be. And here's the big question mark, middle digit number 2. Because this group of bones is associated with the second toe. So all these bones would have a number 2 after them. Just like all these bone names would have a number 3 after them. So if I was to ask you to name this bone right here, you would call it distal digit number 3 because it's associated with the third toe. So that one would probably have like 3 answer blanks or something on the test. We'll have to figure that out. In this bone, the last bone we're going to talk about, you should probably recognize this. Hey, that's the kneecap. Yes, it is. But we're not going to call it the kneecap. We're going to call it the patella. So that's the patella bone. And here it is, big and happy on your screen there. That is a real human patella. No, it's not really that big. So there's no size comparison here, but it's really, you know, a kneecap. It's just this big, huge blow-up picture of a patella. It didn't look so scary when you had the patella sitting in front of you in lab. This looks like it's bigger than your face, but it's really not that big. So sorry about that part. That's it for today. When we come back next time, we're going to take a look at the pelvic girdle, but I didn't want to go over that one today because that's quite a bit. To be honest, that one bone right there is quite a bit. So I'm going to stop recording now and go through